Hello, people of New World. It's me, Lamani, and welcome back to the channel. And today, I just wanted to give you a quick update on PTR. If you haven't seen, because I know some of you don't watch this, the new Forged and Eternum came out, and there are some massive changes, especially for PvE and some great PvE changes, but coming to New World. And this PTR is going to be gigantic, and not simply because there's just new content coming out, but because of the way things are going to be balanced, and we're going to dive into some of this stuff. We'll talk PvP, PvE, other random things that have come through, but here are the top things from the most recent Q&A that you need to know are coming so that you can go give the PTR a test. The first massive change is PvP focused and could have some PvE implications depending on what they choose to do. Regardless, we're focusing on armor weights. Right now, light, medium, and heavy armor, regardless of what perk is on it, is always going to have the same effect. So for instance, if I have Rezil on my light gear, it's the same as Rezil on my heavy gear. Now, what they're looking to do is actually changing the effect of perks when you're in each different armor loadout. For instance, if you look at some of those like neck perks, like the shirking dot removal ones, it'll say when you're in a medium or a light loadout, it'll do this. So it's kind of along those same lines, but essentially now, if you were to have Rezil on light armor, it's going to have a different effect compared to heavy armor or medium armor. The concern with the devs is that light armor, while it is focused on doing higher damage output, higher healing, and that's really where the meta is currently, that light armor players are still very defensive when you stack things like Rezil, Shirking Fort, Freedom, everything that there is, that you can live for a while and still completely blow up other players regardless of armor. And so a lot of people are just opting not even to go to like heavy loadouts. When we're talking about this, I will debate it slightly in the current meta because it doesn't matter what armor loadout I'm in. If I'm getting hit by a dex player who's using a bow or a musket, 9 times out of 10, I'm just going to get beamed until I'm dead with like 3 shots or I get 3, 2, 1, and that's just very strong. But with some of the changes that are coming to the actual balancing of dex, muskets, things like that, this could be a very interesting change that will completely shift the armor meta. So be careful about crafting gear right now. Take a look at the PTR, maybe hold off. Obviously, it's easier to make money right now, but you might want to wait to craft some of your best items because things could completely flip on their heads depending on what they choose to do with perks and loadouts. We may start to see healers in medium, healers in heavy. Maybe heavy meta will come back. I don't know because we have no idea, but it's exciting because the PTR is coming and we'll have more content on that. This is probably the second biggest thing and honestly my personal favorite, but colored abilities in PvP. That's for enemies and allies. If I have a sacred ground, I will have my own allied color versus what an enemy sacred ground looks like. So I'm not standing in a random one that isn't actually mine because it looks like my friendly sacred ground. This also is going to apply to things like Ice Storm, hopefully Ice Showers, Oblivions. Everything that is an ability should have a distinct color dependent on which team you are on. This is probably one of the best changes that they're ever going to make and something we've been wanting for a while, but especially when it comes to competitive war or just running a casual OPR, it is going to be an absolute game changer and huge in terms of enjoyability for the game. Personally, it gets a little confusing when I see all these different abilities and everybody's constantly casting, and so you don't know what is what. So I'm a little interested to see what these colors end up meshing and looking like, and it could just be a colorful, disastrous mess. But nonetheless, it's definitely the correct direction, and I think a lot of players will be super happy about this. Now, the other thing they mentioned was balance. How do they balance? Somebody asked, do you even look at the forums? Like 80% of the posts are about muskets, bows, and greatswords. I thought it was kind of funny, but they're not wrong. Muskets, bows, and greatswords are in an insane spot. They're very powerful, and they're kind of the bane of everybody's existence, especially muskets and bows. They did say in terms of, they didn't really touch on like bow and greatsword, but musket, they're looking at its mobility. They're trying to take away some of the mobility aspects of it and really trying to force a player to be standing still and having to actually aim. Now, I don't know what they mean by this, but again, they kept emphasizing the idea of they wanted to limit mobility and make sure they had to commit to their shots. And so maybe it's going to be things like just decreasing mobility options, or maybe it's going to be things regarding aiming stability or first shot accuracy or just accuracy in general. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's going to be reload time. There's a lot of different possibilities. Again, we'll have to hit the PTR with that. But I think the fact that they're starting to touch these weapons and say, hey, yeah, somebody rolling around with a rapier and a musket, just flying around doing stuff, is kind of crazy in terms of its damage output. Now, to supplement that, because this is so closely tied to the musket and musket players, they're going to start balancing mortal empowerment. Right now, if you get 10, 15 stacks of mortal empowerment, you will just be annihilating people. Now, there is something to say about if you're snowballing that hard that you should still have that power, but it is very strong in combination with a high damage weapon like the musket. So be aware there will be mortal empowerment nerfs potentially coming, or maybe not nerfs, maybe changes. I'm not sure how they're going to adjust it. In my best guess, it's probably just going to be a percentage damage increase or a general how high of a stack you can get to. Additionally, they did mention the bow and the greatsword. Nerfs are incoming onto the PTR for that. We're all aware of those. Not sure what they'll be in the finalized version. We can update more later, but these are still big. Melee dive metas follow greatswords. Greatswords are just crazy strong, locking people down and playing with, especially in combo with a hatchet. And everybody knows how strong bows and muskets were. Now, the kind of issue of the bow and musket being so strong was really drastically put in the spotlight when you looked at the exploit that had been happening, because again, you have already strong weapons and now you've just gotten them bugged and exploited to the point where they're insanely, incredibly overpowered. And so a lot of people might have been even overvaluing how strong they were because there was that bug going on, but they're still very strong and they will be addressed. So in all, musket, bow, greatsword nerf, and mortal empowerment nerf. Now, some other big changes that they mentioned, roadmap and PvE things. They did say that the roadmap is going to be addressed because when we're looking at it, it is 9 things that are on that roadmap, and a lot of people were upset. Now, the thing that they countered with is these are 9 announced things. And something I always kind of backed up was these are only the 9 things that they put out there, but look at how many other things are going to start coming out that we had no idea. Those are the things they just wanted to confirm, the big points. So when it comes to the roadmap, be a bit optimistic. While at face value, it might be a little upsetting and it's not very content heavy or change heavy, be excited because I think there's a lot they're not telling us. And they said within the next month or a couple months, we'll be knowing a lot more. Now, in terms of PvE, they're also focusing on some PvE balance in terms of ranged weapons, maybe even perks with like armor loadouts. But the biggest thing is the ranged weapons. They're going to improve things like Bane on ranged weapons to do more damage, to bring those into the DPS meta instead of just the typical heavy melee weapon setups. And they'll also be adjusting the elemental resistances and mutators so that things like Fire Staff Ice Gauntlet and Void Gauntlet, things like that, are going to be more effective. In terms of other general PvE content, they're looking to finish the complete 1 to 60 Tempest Heart quest line. I'm not quite sure what that means exactly, but the primary quest line and maybe opening up the door for an expansion or something like that, or a level cap increase, we'll see, by the end of the year, and having the zones revamped soon. So things like Brightwood, Weaver's Fen, some of those areas are going to get a redesign, revamp, and make them look a bit cooler and hopefully adjust some of the quests in there. Additionally, they're looking at portal changes. Breaches right now, they're all over the place. People don't really do them anymore because there's not really a point. But they're looking at is actually decreasing their frequency, making them feel more like an event, and giving better, more powerful rewards to make them worthwhile. So also look out for some of those changes coming. They also said no hippos are coming, so some of you might be upset about that. And the final thing, they're really looking at PvE and PvP balance forking. And what do I mean by that? Looking at different stat distributions, perk distributions, and how those look in PvE versus PvP settings. And this is something you can already tell they're starting to do. You know, we have specific perks like Resil that only apply in PvP. We have Banes that only apply in PvE. But they did say they're starting to take more of a dedicated stab at doing it in that manner. And I'm curious to see how this turns out, but be ready for some of those changes. As always, I hope this helps. I hope you enjoyed the FAQ. I'm glad that the devs are this open and transparent, and I'm really excited. For me, there's big things coming. I know I haven't been posting super frequently, but just keep your eyes out. There should be some stuff this week. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you to every single one of you beautiful people for being you. Peace.